hope you guys can hear me okay. I'm sitting outside at work, but I just had a few minutes before I clocked in. I just really wanted to share something with you guys. Gary was speaking last night to the youth out of Matthew chapter 5 and talking about how God calls us to love our enemies and how sometimes God asks us to do things and sacrifice things that sometimes are really near and dear to our heart. And it brought me to this morning. I'm reading in my Pray in the Names of God. I've showed you guys before. Some of you guys are still asking, but Pray in the Names of God by Ann Spangler is really, really awesome. And it breaks it down Monday through Friday in different readings. And this morning it's Genesis chapter 22. It's talking about where Abraham was tested. And I've read this scripture before. I've heard it preached on. But sometimes it just takes you rereading it for yourself in a different way, a different mode, and a different light to just really grasp it a different way. I want to read you a couple of verses here. It says, sometime later, this is in Genesis chapter 22, we're in verse 1. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. I've got that circled. He said to him, Abraham, here I am. He replied. Abraham replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son, Isaac. Sounds kind of familiar about how God took his only son, Jesus, makes me think about that. Whom you love. I've got that underlined and bolded in there. And go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. I see Gary talked about last night how sometimes God calls you, he calls us to love our enemies, but sometimes it requires us giving and sacrificing of things that are really near and dear to our hearts. He talked about, he used one of our guys, Brandon, and talked about, this may be your favorite shirt, but God might call you to give it up in order to bless somebody else, to bless, maybe even bless your enemies. And he talked about having a friend that, he had this favorite tie, and then it's just his favorite tie. And to a man, that's a big deal with his ties. And he called him to give it up and give it to somebody else. And, God's going to bless you for doing that. Sometimes he's going to call us to sacrifice things. And it may not just be things. It may be attitudes. It may be pride. It may be different things that we're holding on to. But, God just really spoke to me in that, and how, God will test us. And sometimes you go through the same things over and over again because maybe we're not passing the test. If you're in school and you have to repeat a grade, or you have to repeat, maybe it's a test, or maybe it's different things. You've got to continue in going through the same trials over and over again, or you're being tested in the same things because you haven't passed the test. So I encourage you that if you're facing the same situation over and over again, to just take a step back and just ask God, is this a test that I'm not passing? Am I not passing the way that I need to? Is there an attitude that I still have that I've got to overcome in order to do what you've called me to do? Because Abraham was tested by God and he passed the test. I cannot imagine taking my child up this mountain knowing that a sacrifice has got to be made, and there's no sacrifice, that he's called you to sacrifice your child. I cannot imagine doing that. I mean, that's, I feel like I'm decently strong in my faith, and I trust God. I do. I trust him with all my heart. But when it comes to asking for something that near and dear to your heart, that's hard. It's not easy. But Abraham trusted God because, see, his son, it goes down a few verses. In verse 6, it says that he took the wood and he took the knife and the fire and everything needed for the sacrifice. And he's got his son right there beside him. I can't imagine what's going through his son's mind, other than he probably trusts his father, just like Abraham trusted God. And it says they reached the place where they told him about, and his son asked him, he said, the fire and the wood are here, Isaac said. This is in verse 7. It says, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering? He's wanting to know where this sacrifice is. And I just encourage you that, if God's called you to sacrifice something and you don't see the lamb, you don't see this, whatever it is that he's calling you to sacrifice, that something has to be done, but you're not sure exactly that final piece that God's looking for. I encourage you to just ask him. Ask your father, just like Isaac asked his father Abraham, where is the lamb? What is it that you want me to do? And I just encourage you today to ask God, because he's going to show you. He's going to open your eyes and he's going to show you, and he may just be testing to see how much you really trust him. I just encourage you to live life unscripted today, and don't forget, talk to the Father about what he's asking you to sacrifice.